Clara knew the smell of defeat. It was a bitter mix of industrial-grade ammonia and the stale, recycled air of the skyscraper she cleaned every night. It clung to her clothes, her hair, her very soul. Each night, she moved like a ghost through the opulent, silent halls of Sterling and Vance, a law firm so prestigious its name was etched in brass on the ground floor. She erased the daytime lives of powerful men, wiping away their fingerprints from glass tables and vacuuming the crumbs of their expensive lunches from plush carpets. She was invisible, a necessary function, no more human than the automatic lights that flickered on as she entered a room. Her life was a tightrope walk over a chasm of debt and eviction notices. Every dollar was a soldier sent to fight a losing war against rent, electricity, and the ever-present need for food. Her daughter, 7-year-old Lily, was the only sunbeam in her perpetually gray world. Lily, with her dandelion fluff hair and eyes the color of a summer sky, was the reason Clara endured the ammonia, the loneliness, the bone-deep weariness that settled in her marrow long before her shift ended at 3 in the morning. Most nights, Lily slept on a small cot tucked away in the janitorial closet on the 34th floor. It was a space no bigger than a coffin, smelling of damp mops and bleach. Clara hated it. She hated the risk, the shame, the quiet fear that someone would discover their secret and her world would finally, irrevocably, collapse. But childcare that ran past midnight was a fantasy, a luxury for the people whose messes she cleaned up. So Lily slept among the buckets and brooms, her small form a heartbreaking testament to their desperation. The building stood opposite a place that hummed with a different kind of energy. Across the rain-slicked asphalt was the clubhouse of the Iron Sentinels Motorcycle Club. A grim, brick building with blacked-out windows, it was a fortress of leather and chrome. Every evening, a phalanx of gleaming motorcycles stood guard outside, their polished metal reflecting the cold, corporate light of the office tower. Clara always hurried past, her eyes fixed on the pavement, clutching Lily's hand a little tighter. The men who lounged outside were massive, bearded, and covered in tattoos that snaked up their necks and across their knuckles. They were the embodiment of everything she had been taught to fear: loud, rough, dangerous. Mr. Thompson was the opposite. A senior partner at the firm, he was the picture of societal respectability. His suits were tailored, his smile was polished, and his voice was a smooth, cultured baritone that dripped with condescension. He was a wolf in a $1,000 suit. For weeks, he had been making Clara's life a quiet hell. He would accidentally spill a dark, sticky soda on the white marble floor moments after she had polished it. He would leave muddy footprints across the carpet she had just vacuumed. He treated her not with overt cruelty, but with the casual disdain of a man swatting at a fly. His campaign of petty torment had begun to curdle into something more sinister. He started staying late, the only one left on the floor besides her and the sleeping form of her daughter in the closet. He would watch her work, his eyes following her every move, making her skin crawl. The vast, empty office, once a place of lonely solace, began to feel like a cage with a predator circling outside. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was predatory, thick with unspoken threats. One Tuesday night, the tension snapped. Clara was polishing the enormous mahogany conference table, her reflection a tired smudge on its perfect surface. Mr. Thompson entered the room, loosening his silk tie. He didn't have his usual smirk. His gaze was heavy, possessive. "Clara," he said, his voice a low purr that sent a shiver of pure dread down her spine. "You work so hard. A woman like you, you deserve more than this." He moved closer, blocking her path to the door. The scent of his expensive cologne was suffocating, a cloying sweetness that made her stomach churn. "I can help you," he continued, his voice dropping. "A new apartment. Better clothes. All you have to do is be appreciative." His meaning was as clear as the gleaming windows overlooking the city. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She clutched the polishing cloth in her hand, the damp fabric her only anchor. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson, but I'm fine," she managed to say, her voice a thin, reedy thing. She tried to sidestep him, but he moved with her, a cruel dance she couldn't escape. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong, his fingers digging into her flesh like talons. The polished smile was gone, replaced by a mask of raw entitlement. "I don't think you understand," he hissed, his face close to hers. "This isn't a negotiation. I'm offering you a way out of this miserable life. You should be grateful." Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Clara. It wasn't just his words, it was the deadness in his eyes. He saw her not as a person, but as an object, a thing to be used and discarded. From the janitor's closet, a small sound, a sleepy whimper from Lily, reached her ears. A different feeling surged through her, fierce and primal. Mama bear instinct. It burned away the fear, leaving behind a core of pure, unyielding steel. "Let go of me," she said, her voice low and shaking with a fury that surprised them both. She yanked her arm back, the sudden movement catching him off guard. She stumbled away, putting the massive table between them. His face contorted with rage. The mask of civility was gone, revealing the ugly, twisted thing beneath. "You stupid woman," he spat. "Do you have any idea who I am? I can have you fired. I can make one phone call, and you'll never work in this city again. You and your little brat will be on the street by the end of the week." He pointed a trembling finger at her. "You have until Friday to come to your senses and show me the proper gratitude. Or you're finished." He stormed out of the room, leaving Clara trembling, her entire body vibrating with adrenaline and terror. She leaned against the table, her legs threatening to give out. The polished wood felt as cold as ice against her skin. The threat hung in the air, a toxic cloud poisoning the sterile environment. The next 2 days were a blur of suffocating anxiety. Clara moved through her duties in a daze, every footstep in the hallway making her jump. She could feel Thompson's eyes on her, even when he wasn't there. His threat had been a promise. She had seen the absolute conviction in his face. She was trapped. Quitting meant no final paycheck, no reference. Staying meant facing him again. Her tightrope had been cut, and the chasm below seemed endless. Friday night arrived like a death sentence. The air in the office felt heavy, charged with dread. Clara had told Lily to stay absolutely silent in the closet, to not make a single sound no matter what she heard. The lie she told her daughter, that they were playing a quiet game, tasted like ash in her mouth. As the hours ticked by, the other employees left one by one, until the floor fell into its usual tomb-like silence. And then, she heard his footsteps, deliberate, unhurried, the sound of the hunter approaching his cornered prey. He found her in the main atrium, a vast, soulless space of marble and glass. He wasn't smiling. "Well?" he demanded, his voice echoing in the emptiness. "Have you made your decision?" Clara's throat was dry. She couldn't form words. She just shook her head, a small, desperate gesture. His face darkened into a thunderous scowl. He lunged forward, grabbing her by the upper arm, his fingers bruising her. "Wrong answer," he snarled, and began to drag her toward the elevators. Panic, raw and absolute, seized her. This was it. This was the moment her world ended. But then she saw Lily. Her little girl, her sunbeam, was peering out of the janitor's closet, her face pale with terror, her blue eyes wide with a fear no child should ever know. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. In that instant, Clara found her voice. "Run, Lily!" she screamed, the words tearing from her throat. "Run and don't stop." For a moment, Lily was frozen. Then, her mother's desperate command broke the spell. She bolted. Her small sneakers slapped against the polished marble as she ran for the main glass doors, for the street, for the only lights she could see. She ran from the monster in the suit, from the fear in her mother's eyes, and toward the one place that was alive in the dead of night. She ran toward the low rumble of engines and the warm glow spilling from the open door of the Iron Sentinels clubhouse. The bikers were outside, leaning against their machines, sharing stories and cigarettes in the cool night air. The sudden appearance of a small, terrified child running full tilt toward them brought all conversation to a dead stop. Lily, her chest heaving, tears streaming down her face, skidded to a halt in front of the largest of them all. He was a mountain of a man, with a wild gray beard and a leather vest covered in patches. His name was Stone, and he was the president of the club. Lily grabbed a fistful of his leather vest, her small body trembling. "He's coming," she sobbed, her voice cracking. "He's hurting my mommy. Please. He's coming." Stone's face, weathered and hard, softened as he looked down at the terrified child. He placed a hand, surprisingly gentle, on her small head. His eyes, the color of worn denim, lifted from the girl to the glass doors of the skyscraper across the street. He saw it all in a flash. The shadow of a man dragging a woman back from the entrance, the frantic struggle, the unmistakable silhouette of violence. Everything stopped. The easy camaraderie vanished, replaced by a silent, focused intensity. Stone didn't need to speak. He shared a single, hard look with his sergeant-at-arms, a man called Wrench. It was a look that communicated everything. A line had been crossed. Their code, unspoken but absolute, had been activated. Innocents were in danger. Without a word, 6 of them detached from the group. They moved as one, a wave of black leather and grim purpose. They didn't run. They walked across the street, their heavy boots eating up the asphalt with a steady, rhythmic cadence that sounded like a war drum. They pushed through the glass doors just as Thompson shoved Clara hard against a marble pillar. Her head connected with the stone with a sickening crack, and she slid to the floor, dazed. Thompson stood over her, his face a mask of purple rage, his hand raised to strike. "Is there a problem here?" The voice was not loud, but it cut through the tense silence like a shard of ice. It was deep, calm, and held the rumble of a Harley-Davidson engine at idle. Thompson spun around, his mouth open to unleash a torrent of arrogant threats. The words died in his throat. He was facing a wall of men who seemed to block out the light. They were larger than life, their faces set like granite, their eyes holding a chilling lack of fear. He was a man used to power, to intimidating people with his wealth and status. But the currency of his world was worthless here. These men operated on a different economy, one of loyalty, strength, and a brutal sense of justice. "This is a private building," Thompson stammered, trying to regain his footing, puffing out his chest. "You're trespassing. I'm ordering you to leave immediately." Stone ignored him completely, his gaze fixed on the crumpled form of Clara on the floor. He knelt beside her, his movements slow and deliberate so as not to startle her. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked, his voice now gentle. Clara looked up, her vision swimming. She saw the club patches, the tattoos, the intimidating facade, but in his eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen all night: concern. Wrench and another biker, a wiry man known as Ghost, moved past Thompson as if he were a piece of furniture. They positioned themselves between him and Clara, a living shield. Ghost extended a hand to Clara, helping her to her feet, while Wrench simply stood, his arms crossed over his massive chest, his stare pinning Thompson to the spot. Lily, who had followed them in, ran to her mother, burying her face in Clara's side. The protective circle was complete. Thompson's arrogance, his only real weapon, returned in a desperate surge. "I am a senior partner at Sterling and Vance," he boomed, his voice echoing unnaturally in the lobby. "I will have you all arrested. I will sue your pathetic little club into oblivion." Stone rose to his full height, which was considerable. He was a good head taller than Thompson and twice as wide. He had a faint, cold smile on his lips that didn't reach his eyes. "I don't think you'll be suing anyone," he said softly. He pulled out his phone. "Modern buildings like this are funny," Stone mused, his tone conversational. "Cameras everywhere. In the elevators, the hallways, the conference rooms. They see everything." He nodded to another biker, a younger man with a laptop bag slung over his shoulder named Glitch. "Glitch here is our tech guy. He's very persuasive with digital systems. He's already reviewing the last 2 weeks of security footage from this floor. Tell me, Mr. Thompson, are you a photogenic man?" The color drained from Thompson's face. The beads of sweat on his forehead were no longer from anger, but from pure, unadulterated fear. His whole life was built on a carefully constructed image, a facade of respectability. He could see it all crumbling. "This is illegal," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You can't do that." "What's illegal?" Wrench interjected, his voice a low growl. "Is putting your hands on a woman who doesn't want them there. What's illegal is terrorizing a mother in front of her child." Thompson, cornered and desperate, made one last, foolish move. He lunged for Clara, a wild cry of "she's a liar" erupting from his lips. He never made it. Wrench's arm shot out, not in a punch, but in a precise, controlled motion. His hand clamped onto Thompson's shoulder, his thumb finding a pressure point. Thompson gasped, a strangled yelp of pain escaping him as his knees buckled. The strength in his body evaporated, leaving him a whimpering, pathetic heap. "I'd stand still if I were you," Wrench advised, his voice dangerously quiet. "You're making a scene." Stone looked down at the man, his expression one of utter contempt. "Go ahead and call security," he said, his voice laced with iron. "In fact, let's get the police down here too. I'm sure they'd be fascinated to watch the footage Glitch is compiling. And we've been doing some research since your little ultimatum to this lady. It turns out 2 other cleaners were let go from this floor in the last year. Both single mothers. Both after you started staying late. I have a feeling they might be willing to talk now." The arrival of the building's security guards was an anticlimax. They saw a well-dressed man being held effortlessly by a mountain of a biker, a terrified woman and child being shielded by several others, and a young man tapping away on a tablet, a grimly satisfied look on his face. When the police arrived, the Iron Sentinels presented their case with calm, irrefutable logic. They had the footage queued up and ready. They had the witness, Clara, who, bolstered by their presence, found the strength to tell her story. And they had the names of the other women. The fallout was swift and brutal. Mr. Thompson, the pillar of the community, was let out of his prestigious office building in handcuffs. The story exploded. The firm, desperate to distance itself from the scandal, fired him via a press release before he had even been formally charged. His carefully crafted world, built on intimidation and the abuse of power, was shattered into a million pieces. The wolf was unmasked, and the community saw him for the predator he truly was. For Clara, the experience was a surreal whirlwind. She was no longer invisible. The police officers treated her with respect. The firm's managing partner called her personally to apologize, offering a generous settlement. But it was the Iron Sentinels who truly saved her. They didn't just intervene and ride away. They stayed. They became the family she and Lily had never had. Stone discovered she was months behind on rent and was facing eviction. The next morning, her landlord called, confused, to inform her that her lease had been paid in full for the next year. Wrench, who owned a successful contracting business, learned of her grueling night shifts. He offered her a job as his office manager. 9 to 5, weekends off, double what she had been making. It was a lifeline she had never dared to dream of. They helped her move from her cramped, crumbling apartment into a bright, safe 2-bedroom unit in a quiet neighborhood with a good school for Lily. The bikers showed up on moving day like a small army, lifting furniture with ease, their deep laughter echoing through the new, empty rooms, filling them with warmth and life before the boxes were even unpacked. Lily, who had been quiet and withdrawn, blossomed in their presence. She called them her big, loud uncles, and would sit perched on the handlebars of their parked motorcycles, regaling them with stories from school. They, in turn, treated her like a princess, spoiling her with small gifts and showering her with the protective attention of a dozen fathers. A year passed, the seasons turned, and life settled into a new, wonderful rhythm. Clara was no longer the ghost of the 34th floor. She was confident, her smile genuine, her eyes free from the constant shadow of fear. She excelled at her new job, her quiet efficiency and meticulous nature making her indispensable. She had started taking online courses at night, studying to become a paralegal, a path she found ironic and deeply satisfying. She was building a future, not just surviving the present. One bright Saturday afternoon, Clara was at the park with Lily. The sun was warm, and the air was filled with the sound of children's laughter. As Lily played on the swings, Clara noticed a situation unfolding near the basketball courts. A young teenage boy was backed against a chain-link fence by 3 older, larger boys. Their posture was aggressive, their words sharp and cruel. They knocked the book from the younger boy's hands, scattering his papers across the dusty ground. The old Clara would have averted her eyes. She would have gathered Lily and hurried away, her heart pounding, too afraid to draw attention, too powerless to intervene. But she wasn't the old Clara anymore. She thought of the men who had stood for her when she couldn't stand for herself. She thought of the strength they had shown her, the strength she now realized was also inside of her. She stood up and walked toward them, her steps calm and measured. She didn't shout. She didn't threaten. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet but firm, cutting through their taunts. "Is there a problem here?" The words were the same ones Stone had used, and they felt right. They felt powerful. The bullies turned, surprised. They saw not a threat, but a woman with an unshakable calm in her eyes. It confused them. They mumbled something, their bravado deflating under her steady gaze, and shuffled away. Clara knelt and helped the boy gather his papers. He was shaking, trying hard not to cry. "Thank you," he whispered. Clara gave him a warm smile. "No one should make you feel small," she said. She took a pen from her purse and wrote her number on a slip of paper. "If you ever need help, if you ever just need someone to call, here." He took the paper, his eyes wide with gratitude. As she walked back to Lily, a profound sense of peace settled over her. She finally understood. True strength wasn't about intimidation or power over others. It was about standing in the gap for those who couldn't stand for themselves. It was about being the light that pushes back the darkness. Heroes, she realized, didn't always wear capes. Sometimes they wore leather. The story concluded, as many of their weeks did, at the Iron Sentinel's Sunday barbecue. The clubhouse, once a symbol of fear, was now a second home. The air smelled of grilled meat and gasoline, a combination that now meant safety and family. Lily, squealing with delight, was perched high on Stone's broad shoulders, her small hands tangled in his gray beard. Clara stood talking with Wrench, laughing at one of his stories. She looked around at the circle of men, these unlikely saviors, these angels in leather. They had seen her when she was invisible. They had given her a voice when she was silent. They hadn't just saved her from a monster. They had saved her from a life of quiet desperation and showed her how to live again. They were her protectors, her friends, her family. And as the sun began to set, casting long shadows from the line of gleaming motorcycles, Clara knew, with absolute certainty, that she was finally, truly, home.